Broadcasting live from an unlimited hat budget, this is Pop Culture Reference, your one-stop reference for all things pop culture. I'm one of your hosts, Garrett Strother.
And I'm one of your other hosts, Seamus Connolly.
And we've got some good old-fashioned rootin' tootin' western fun to talk about on this week's main segment with the new Netflix original film, The Harder They Fall. But first, we're going to get in some news.
Starting off with the news that today the Black Panther 2 production has officially shut down due to an onset injury of Letitia Wright. This injury, I believe, actually happened back in August, and they've been trying to continue the production as far as they could while she's been recovering after, I believe it was like a stunt rig accident of some kind. But they've just reached a point where she still needs a little time, and I think they said that they are going to resume in January 2022, I believe.
They already recently pushed back a bunch of the Marvel slate anyway, including Black Panther 2, so I wonder if this will just not even impact its release date, or if that was already built into the recent delay.
Yeah, I feel like considering the fact that this has been something they've been working around for a couple months now, maybe that was, they kind of like did the math and did the risk assessment of how they were going to pull that off, so I'm going to assume that it probably is, but I have no qualms with the idea that they will push it again if need be. I'm sure they're banking a lot on this one, also considering the Black Panther legacy they have going on right now, and what they, I'm sure, want to keep going for however many more movies. So I don't know. We're kind of marveled out mostly. I feel like we talk about that a lot. I'm more than happy with Letitia Wright taking her time to heal and be better, and for them to do whatever they need to timeline-wise with Marvel. I feel like I'm better receiving on Marvel stuff when there's been a longer time anyway, so this is fine, I think.
I mean, there's a reason we're not covering Eternals this week, you know?
Yeah, I guess that's fair, yeah. And honestly, I mean, I don't want to get too far into it yet. I'm pretty happy that we did this one over Eternals, the Harder They Fall.
Me too. But our other piece of news that we have is the long-anticipated casting for the film Wicked, being directed by John M. Chu, starring Cynthia Erivo as Elphaba and Ariana Grande as Glinda. And I think that's pretty good casting. What about you, Seamus?
I actually have never seen Wicked. I don't know much about Wicked in general. I like Cynthia Erivo. I think Ariana Grande might be a little overrated, if I'm being honest. She kind of bores me a little bit, but this is kind of Wicked is such a production that they're going to make it so exciting and cool and interesting to look at the very least. And, I'll go see this. I would be more inclined to see this than, like, the West Side Story remake, which we were talking about a little bit ago.
Oh, certainly. I'm way more interested in this than the West Side Story remake.
Like, just between John M. Chu doing it and the idea of, Wicked is popular for a reason. I remember the soundtrack being really good, at least, and I think it'll be fun. It'll be that one's like a theater watch. I feel like that's more akin to that stage play kind of experience. So I think that would be worth seeing with the big speakers.
Maybe to prep, we should go see Wicked in Chicago, Seamus.
Is that just, like, ongoing forever in Chicago and Broadway and stuff?
I think so. My sister's seeing it in London this week, or already saw it in London this week, so
I would go do that. It's been the last, like, big Broadway musical I saw was School of Rock, like, 5 years ago in Manhattan, and we just, like, got the sale tickets. You know how you do that? You just, like, go get the cheapest thing, and just to see a Broadway show. Didn't matter what it was, but it was still really, plenty of cringe in that story, let alone the child actor Broadway version of it. So I think going to see Wicked would be fun.
Well, Ariana Grande, I think, has the right, like, bubbly, fairy quality to her.
I'll agree with that for sure.
Even though she's not the best actor in the world, and Cynthia Erivo is perfect casting. I think she's a little on the older side, maybe, but who really cares?
Yeah, it'll be all good for her. I think there's going to be enough CG in this that they could do they'll pull a little Vin Diesel subtle touch up on the back end.
Yeah, should we move on, I guess, after that nice and short news segment to our main segment?
Yeah, I'm excited. Let's get into our main segment, The Harder They Fall.
For today's main segment, we're going to be covering the brand new James Samuel Netflix film, The Harder They Fall, starring Idris Elba, Jonathan Majors, Regina King, Zazie Beetz, Lakeith Stanfield, Delroy Lindo, and a bunch of other really good actors.
Yeah, this cast was so stacked. And, sometimes they bring together a big ensemble and there's a lot of overlooking and outshining, but everybody really got, their great moments on screen. Even, the more, or the less prominent characters, I felt so much for them in a lot of these more emotional moments, even though for the majority of this movie, I was just having a cowboy blast. Everything was just everything I wanted it to be, and then when it needed to break down to the emotional stuff, it did not skimp on it at all.
No, I was incredibly impressed with this film, and there are definitely things that were tonally inconsistent. I think it was a little long, but I thought it was really, really fun, and the postmodern recontextualization of Western tropes is, I think, the best I've seen that done since Sam Raimi's The Quick and the Dead 30 years ago.
Yeah, man, it felt very fresh in a lot of ways. It's got that history attached to it that is, I mean, we'll get into that later, but very much not a historically accurate representation, but it is a very well done kind of sandbox mishmash of what these people represented in the real world, and how they're written is so well done. I mean, maybe that was also a big performance aspect of it all too, because everybody was just kind of killing it left and right, but thoroughly impressed. You're not wrong that there is some tonal inconsistencies as they were, but I was very satisfied with this. And as especially a Netflix original, I was desperately trying to remember the last time I was really into a Netflix original anything, really. And, this one is going to stick with me for a while.
And this actually looked like a real movie in a way
Yeah.
that Netflix originals usually do not. They look like TV movies.
Yeah, definitely. I didn't see The Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I know that was the last Netflix Western thing. I guess that was probably more of a Coen-y thing than a Netflix thing, but
that's one of my lesser favorite Coens, I'd say. I'm not particularly impressed with that film.
So, The Harder They Fall over Buster Scruggs for you?
Maybe, actually. I would say so.
Because there are, moments in this that gave me that Tombstone-esque... It's not, a funny moment per se, but it's, a moment where characters will make you, take a step back and, appreciate the more jovial badassery that's going on, instead of, all super hardcore violence or all Apple Dumpling Gang style goofery. I bring up the Apple Dumpling Gang far too often.
It's because it's great.
Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Well, I think there are going to be a lot of comparisons between this movie and Django Unchained, not only because Black Cowboy, but because there's this whole, postmodern, hyper-stylized aesthetic that both of the films kind of share. But I think this film uses it way more effectively. Django Unchained is not a film I care for a lot. I think the actors in it are good. But I think this uses that postmodern Western pastiche in such a more effective way, and actually empowers its black leads in a way that Django Unchained kind of doesn't. There's still a lot of white savior stuff in Django Unchained.
Yeah, with all that, Schultz stuff and all that. Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah, so I really enjoyed this aspect of especially using real-life historical figures in this fictional story to really elevate that that part of the storytelling.
Yeah, I completely agree. That's a really good way to put it, where it's that pseudo-realism that is attached to the name. The very intro of this movie is reminding us of the humans behind the characters, albeit not a very close connection in reality, but it definitely, in something like Django, you can see a lot of that as the characters are the playthings of Quentin Tarantino trying to make a big bloody splash, but the characters feel more human on screen than what they could have maybe been if they were handled in a lesser way.
Did you have a favorite character, Seamus?
I really liked Cherokee Bill as a bad guy. I honestly, I kind of wish he did more bad guy stuff. They kind of set him up earlier as like the big bad, I guess one of the big bad lieutenants of Idris Elba, and he kind of shows his dastardly nature, but I kind of wish we saw more of that. He's a very cold, mean kind of guy, and especially, I think the last thing I saw him in was Judas and the Black Messiah, and he plays like another cold. I guess it's a very different character, obviously, but I like that he can be that more savage villain that will like break those rules, and I kind of loved it. But even Jonathan Majors, maybe I just am falling in love with him since Loki. I kind of want him to be in everything now. I thought he was very charming, and especially as equally as bloodthirsty as he needed to be in a lot of the ways that when the climactic gun battles were happening, he was still very likable as well as capable. So I mean, I am a big fan of that. Idris Elba, of course, shout out. He's like my number one villain guy now. He plays a ruthless villain, and I think he's great for it.
Jonathan Majors is also hosting SNL next week.
Oh, no way. That is cool. That is very cool. He's gonna be the most famous person in the world, I think. I think he's really gonna blow up super hard.
Amazing. He's really charming. Did you see Da 5 Bloods?
No, I didn't even know he was into Five Bloods.
No, he's the youngest guy, obviously, into Five Bloods.
Right.
He's so good. That movie is full of so many great performances. Also, Delroy Lindo, who's in this movie as Bass Reeves, I think probably should have won an Oscar for his performance into Five Bloods.
Damn, I gotta see that movie. That's a dark one. That's not a jovial watch, is it?
It's like many Spike Lee movies. It has moments of extreme violence and disturbing stuff, but also it's really funny sometimes.
Okay, I can get behind that.
It's that movie is also kind of tonally inconsistent, but in a way that I don't think is a detriment to it.
In the way that Spike Lee is famous for every one of his movies being weirdly totally inconsistent.
And I think that this movie is very clearly inspired by the tone of Spike Lee. Regina King does that Malcolm X thing, like in one of her first couple scenes. Lots of Spike Lee in this movie. I think there are. Let's talk about some of the influences that we picked up on before we move into spoilers, because I already brought up The Quick and the Dead, which I think there's so much Raimi in this movie, especially specifically The Quick and the Dead. The characterization of Jim Beckworth's character in this film feels a lot like Leonardo DiCaprio's character in that. The opening credits seem very Good, the Bad, and the Ugly to me.
Oh yeah, for sure. With flashing all of their like profiles with their name and their character.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love
the opening introduction with Idris Elba feels a lot like the opening with Henry Fonda in Once Upon a Time in the West, whereas this traditional leading man is shown to the audience as a villain, which they aren't usually known for playing.
No, I loved it.
I'm trying to think of any other things off the top of my head that really stuck out to me.
Well, once we get into the old spoiler region, we're definitely going to be bringing up a lot more specifics about how we were talking about some of the more modern Western stuff, like the Tarantino's Django and The Hateful Eight and stuff like that.
Yeah, definitely. Should we move into spoilers?
I would love to here. It's a pretty long movie, so there's a lot of spoilers to talk about.
Yeah. So, final thoughts. I really enjoyed this movie. I highly recommend it, especially if you like Westerns.
Yeah, it scratches all the itches you need for that classic Western, and like we've been kind of bubbling about here, it's not just another Western to kind of get lost in the shuffle. The style, the editing, the soundtrack, my God, really lights this movie up. It's a full recommend from both halves of the pop culture reference team.
All right, but this is your official Spoiler warning for The Harder They Fall.
Where do you want to start? That little boy's family gets murdered real hardcore. I did not expect that.
Oh man, it
The
was
mom
rough.
first. Oh man, that's wild.
I hate to bring up Tarantino again. I really do, because you know how much I hate bringing up Tarantino. But it did remind me a little bit of the opening of Inglourious Basterds.
Oh sure, hell yeah. Just very the calm family home, kind of being invaded by an equally calm evil force that really shatters the calm of the other side.
And it's a hard thing because, you want tonally to make that introduction. That is the scene that the entire rest of the movie hinges on. It, like all the best westerns, it's about revenge, right?
Of course.
And you need to feel the horror and the trauma that would haunt Nat Love for the rest of his arc over the course of the film. And so in that, I think it's really effective, but also, what a way to start this movie. Holy wow.
Yeah, I mean, they do the very beginning and the very end of Inglourious Basterds in like 5 minutes to start us off. That's kind of crazy.
But I think it works for the film. I just do think that some of the violence is portrayed as really fun, and some of the violence is portrayed as pretty disturbing, and that is where a lot of the tonal inconsistency does come from.
Yeah, I can feel that. Like there are like those wicked gunfights in the town, and ambushes, and really like every other death is in like such a cool, unique kind of surprising way. Like these kills are not just like your average gunfight, but then there's stuff like, I don't know. I was groaning a little bit watching Nat Love get his ribs broken by Idris Elba, just getting like completely pummeled, tortured wise. That was pretty gnarly stuff. Or I guess it's a lot of the Idris Elba stuff. Him knocking the gold teeth out of his friend's mouth with his pistol is like making him cry, shoving the gun in his face again. Yeah, that was pretty tough.
It's basically when the bad guys do violence, it's super disturbing, and when the good guys do violence, it's cool. It's like,
who would have thought, huh?
Dion Cole is the sheriff and mayor of the town who has turned on Idris Elba, and he's really, really funny and really a bizarre role that would be really hard to get right, I think.
I love that they intro him with he's like practicing his speech to Idris Elba about when he shows up, and I think that was just like a fantastic, because we really only see that guy for a couple scenes in that intro one, and then like more towards the climax he kind of comes back to help our boys, but you kind of get everything you need to out of that guy in the short time that he has as a character.
I think pretty much every character introduction in this movie is great.
Yeah.
I think it's so efficient at telling you who these characters are, but also making them really memorable and cool at the same time.
Oh yeah, a lot of these people, like we were talking about Magnificent Seven. Sometimes I don't even remember the shtick of some of the seven that are in that, but these characters were so individual in what they were, and very fun to see kind of mesh with each other when it's just the off time when they're at the camp or whatever. They're just kind of talking with each other. It's very, very fun to see that.
I'd love to read the screenplay.
Oh yeah, that would be very interesting, because a lot of the, I'm probably assuming here, but a lot of the back and forth with these characters seem like they could have been just straight up improvised in a lot of ways, like the very funny reactions of them just kind of razzing each other.
Well, again, going with that kind of postmodern pastiche we were talking about, most of the characters in this talk contemporarily. They don't speak in like old Western tropes or anything like that. I think especially the scene where Bill Pickett and what's his name, Jim, are picking off the gang, the Crimson Hood gang.
Yeah. Another great intro to those characters.
Yeah. Oh, an excellent intro. Plus Damon Wayans shows
yeah,
up.
Yeah. Oh, that's pretty great. Yeah, he's just busting his balls about his quick draw versus Cherokee Bill, and their weird familial connection to the Crimson Hood gang leader guy.
But I think overall the two standout performances in this really are Lakeith Stanfield and Zazie Beetz, at least to me.
Oh, she was so good. I thought, and again, I hate to keep saying it, her intro with the song that she's singing at her bar, I was jamming out to that. For a little bit, this has very like musical moments. This movie, I'll be honest. There's a lot of moments of like song breakdown.
And I like that. I like that music is so integrated
Mhm.
this into this film. I especially a song will end and Jonathan Majors' character will just like be whistling
Yeah,
it.
he'll just be humming it under his breath. Very subtle. Very very nice.
The moment that really stuck out to me as like a musical moment was the night before she goes into town, into Redwood, right?
Yeah, that's the name.
There's this like really classically lit blue light
Oh yeah.
moonlight sequence where she and Nat are overlooking the town and they're like having this like really intimate moment and he's singing and the music is behind him.
Oh
And
yeah.
I'm like, is this just gonna be a musical now?
He's gonna break out. Yeah, she's like, what does she say? It's like a truly like a very sweet, touching moment. She's like, once we're done, we're gonna go our separate ways, but until then, I'm like right here with you, or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's very very tender moment before another very intense part where she goes back into the town.
Yeah, again, going from cool violence to tender moments to disturbing violence to cool violence
Yeah.
again, and
Totally inconsistent, keeping us on our toes purposefully. I don't know.
I don't know. I think it sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't.
Yeah, that's
and
fair.
That's the key to it because tonal inconsistency is only tonal inconsistency when it doesn't work, right?
Exactly, that's fair. Oh man, I'm just trying to think back on more disturbing violence, and one of the saddest, and I mean pretty graphic to me. I feel like whenever anybody gets shot in the cheek, like from the front of their face in the
Yeah,
cheek, that
that's
really
rough.
disturbs me. And our boy Quickdraw just gets his face blown off when he's doing the cool. He carved Cherokee into the side of a special bullet. He's like really taking his time with the countdown. I mean, I knew it was gonna happen like from the start, pretty much, but it was very sad and also very messed up.
I was a little actually surprised by that because that is like this movie's on the whole seemingly so dedicated to kind of not subverting but to tweaking western tropes
Mm.
that I was a little surprised that his telegraphed arc went as such. But I will say, you were saying that you felt like Lakeith Stanfield's character, Cherokee Bill, should have had more bad guy stuff to do. But I thought that it was a really interesting thing to see. You know, he had, again, another great character introduction on the train at the beginning when they're breaking
Ooh, yeah.
Idris Elba out. And he just slashes that guy's like tendons in his
Yeah,
legs.
he just does like a matrix like quick slash in 4 different directions, and then he just like falls over.
And he talks about how he's like an honorable man and he abhors violence, but he'll do it if he has to, and all this stuff. And he talks the big talk, like the whole movie about how he's the quickest draw in the West, and how he is this cool cucumber and all this stuff. And then at the end, he's a coward and a cheat. He shoots men in the back. He shoots like he is not a fair fighter at all. All the honor that he's kind of built himself up with. Ultimately, he's just a coward. And
That
it
is very
reminded me a
true.
lot of Count Rugen from The Princess Bride.
Oh yeah, sure. Just that, yeah. That is a good comparison. That talking the talk and then really laying out the cowardice when it comes down to it. I mean, and granted, the 3 big things of violence that I can remember are the slashing the legs, cheating the count with the quick draw, and shooting the other cool coin guy in the back. And maybe I just wanted more dastardly stuff because I just like him on screen, and I think that was always like perfectly evil. But then there are moments of like, him not doing the initial duel, or him.
There are multiple times in this movie where he does essentially spare somebody's life.
Yeah, maybe
But-
that's kind of what I'm thinking of. But
I think it's an indicator that whenever he feels like he's in power, he doesn't necessarily commit violence, but whenever there's somebody that he knows is better than him, he cheats them. He gets the
Oh,
better of them.
that's what it is. He doesn't have the skill, but he'll walk around like people think that he does, and then when it's challenged, he cheats him. That is pretty good.
Because Bill Pickett, who he shoots in the back, is a marksman, like an amazing marksman, and in real life, I think was a rodeo guy, a rodeo marksman, and I think that's such a good that 1-2 punch of him cheating the count and then shooting Bill in the back makes his comeuppance almost immediately with Cuffy, who we haven't talked about at all.
Oh
Great
yeah,
character.
she was great, and maybe because they sprinkle in a little bit of rivalry between her and Quick Draw, and maybe I just needed that little Quick Draw saga to have more of an arc of her, or at least I don't know, maybe her beating him before she gets the opportunity to avenge him against Quick Draw, or at least Quick Draw getting a single time he gets to really do that with somebody more important than just like the Crimson Hood gang.
But I think that's what makes, just like you not knowing Lakeith Stanfield is a coward before he shoots him, that's what makes the death so impactful.
God, yeah, that really did hit me
It feels
hard.
incomplete. He's a young life cut off.
He is a talent. He does have these Wild West aspirations. He's like us if we got to be cowboys. We're like, oh yeah, I'll do quick draw stuff. I'll talk smack all day, and I'll brag and do cowboy things. And
I like the idea that in your fantasy of us being cowboys, we're like good cowboys and good gunmen and stuff.
Yeah, exactly. We're not doing the evil things. We're like the Robin Hood cowboys who are like doing cool social stuff.
I mean that we're like competent. I mean that we're actually quick draws and stuff.
Oh hell yeah! What fantasy am I like actually herding cattle here, man? I want to do that gunfight stuff.
Let's talk about the third act a little bit, because once again, Quick in the Dead. There's so much Quick in the Dead in this movie, which you've not seen, but it really is present. We talked about Cherokee Bill's demise at the hands of Cuffy, and then, of course, Bass Reeves and Nat Love are going after Idris Elba's character, Rufus Buck. But then there's our third storyline, which is Stagecoach Mary Zazie Beetz going after Regina King's treacherous Trudy.
Yes, that was a cool fight in the like cloth dyeing hut of the town. A very fun showdown between them where they have to really, use everything at their disposal, and it's all colorful and interesting the way they're using their very specific environment for this fight.
Yeah, I thought that was a really inventive fight that ended, I thought, weirdly prematurely and non-decisively.
Yeah, the conclusion was not. There was none there.
Because she just hits her real hard, and then she is bleeding on the ground, but that's it. And then, of course, at the end of the film, the reason for that is they're teasing maybe a sequel?
I think there's literally no reason for them to have ended it like that unless they have full intentions and maybe already a green light. Or I guess they need a week before Netflix will give them the green light to see how they're doing, but...
Well, I don't think that's necessarily true. I think that there's a thematic resonance to having her come back, that vengeance begets vengeance, violence begets violence,
That's true. I mean, that's a pretty big theme throughout this whole movie, especially because we were talking third act and we kind of glossed over the James Bond, Spectre, Metal Gear Solid, soap opera style secret brother twist that Idris Elba, his character is long lost brothers with Nat Love.
Yeah, which I think is a very interesting choice. Again, a more thematically resonant one, I think, about we're not so different.
Yeah. Oh yeah, wait a minute. Austin Powers is that twist as well.
Yeah, but it's talking about privilege, and it's talking about how the different upbringings of these men somehow brought them simultaneously so far apart, but to the same conclusion. And I wasn't really, I didn't think the movie needed it, but Idris Elba and Jonathan Majors do such a good job at selling that
Oh yeah.
moment that it still resonated with me in a way that like Spectre right doesn't, because it just
Yeah,
doesn't
yeah.
work. It doesn't sell it. This is a quiet moment between these two men, not at all grounded in reality. I think I read that Nat Love never met Rufus Buck, like they never
Mm.
crossed paths at all. But it felt kind of out of nowhere.
Yeah, they didn't really, because they could have sprinkled in a little bit of, you know, a little clue here and there, and maybe the intro where they are all sitting down at the table together. But
Well, that in itself is kind of a hint, isn't it?
oh,
Though?
I guess that's fair. I guess that's fair. But yeah, it does come out of nowhere a little bit, just in everything else. Even when there's like moments where Idris Elba is talking to other characters about him in any way that he could have subtly indicated that there was more going on than just a one-way vengeance thing. And like you said, their performance, them looking into each other's eyes, both of them crying as they're confronting this about each other and themselves, is very, very well done. And I was a little afraid for a second that they were gonna pull a BS revenge story ending and it just be like he's gonna leave him or whatever to live in some way. But they very much don't do that, and he unloads his pistol into his chest. Yeah, all 6 shots. Just yeah, I liked how they handled that ending, even though there was that emotional family tie. All of a sudden, it was still a good way to end that. Nat Love specifically, his arc.
I think it all comes back to what you were saying at the very beginning, Seamus, which is I was so taken with all of these characters. I was so invested and interested in their stories, in their quirks, in their monologues, in the mythic nature of the American Western, right?
Oh yeah.
I was still on board through that because of all of the work that this movie had done to endear me to all of these characters and invest me in all of these characters for the rest of the runtime.
Yeah, truly, even when there is like an extra 30 minutes of like the plot where they go rob the bank.
Oh,
Even though I loved that
we haven't even talked about
sequence.
that.
Yeah, I loved that sequence in general. I think that they kind of go out of their way to put that in there, and I think there could have been a little more seamless of an integration for that specific part, since it did feel a little long in the end. But
the idea being that they go rob the bank at a white town, a literal white town where all of the
the buildings are white.
The buildings are white.
The dirt in the road is white. It's all white horses and white clothes.
I loved it. I thought it was such a great production design choice.
Oh, yeah.
That could have felt really stupid, but again, the hyper stylization of this movie, that just worked.
Totally. And the fact that Cuffy's wearing that like bright red dress too is like that femme fatale, going in there and getting laughed in the face by that teller and then just totally flipping the script and fairly they mention it fairly easily rob that bank.
Yeah. And I mean, I like that they didn't. It could, again, kind of like Django, it would have been really easy to just have that be a satisfying moment of, okay, we're gonna massacre the racists.
Yeah, sure, but they just, done very well, where they still take him for everything they're worth, kind of take away all of that power, put him in the corner, shake the bank manager's hand like it's a transaction.
When the bank manager calls him sir when he's helping him load the stolen saddlebags onto his horse.
That's very good. Oh yeah. I almost want to even say that was a redecorated set that they used in Django. You know how that like one western town, you can kind of see it in a lot of modern western stuff? I think that might have been the same one.
I thought Redwood looked an awful lot like the town from the Magnificent Seven remake.
Yeah, I also thought that as well, yes. I wonder why they specifically didn't focus on that chapel as much.
Well,
Too familiar.
That chapel's important in the Magnificent Seven remake, that's for sure. I would watch 10 more of these, I'll be honest. Like, yeah. I just loved it.
They could have made this a series and I would have been hooked instantly for sure. I will look forward to I mean, if people like it as much as we did. I can guarantee at least one more sequel, so
I don't think people did. From what I've been reading, most people didn't seem to be as on board with it as we are. I think they couldn't get past some of the stuff, but I think this works so much better for me than something like a Django Unchained. It really has a clear respect for not only Western history, but also, the history of the genre of the Western
yeah.
and kind of reconciling the differences between those two things in a really interesting way.
Yeah, definitely. It's as classic as it feels fresh, and that is a great dichotomy to have when you're, maybe taking a chance with a direct-to-streaming Netflix movie like this, but
A kind of first-time director, too.
yeah, from somebody who is very much not known. I mean, that cast, how could you cover that up? That's like one of the best casts I've seen in a long time, so that definitely, helps it along for sure, but I would truly recommend this to anybody, and I hope I'm gonna try to turn people towards it, because if people are giving it kind of a bad name right off the bat right now, I would like to counterbalance that in any way.
No, I really liked it. I do want to give a shout out to James Samuel, who, in addition to writing, directing this movie, is he's a singer-songwriter called The Bullets. That's his stage name, but he also did a lot of the work on the Baz Luhrmann Great Gatsby soundtrack, which I'm not wild about that movie, but that soundtrack's awesome.
Oh, hell yeah, that soundtrack is great. I watched The Harder They Fall with subtitles, and a couple of the songs would come on, and it was like a blank song, the Samuel remix or whatever. So like he personally did a lot of the remixes for this soundtrack, I think, as well.
I love it. Yeah, I am very pleasantly surprised by this movie. I wasn't expecting it to be bad or anything. I was pretty excited for it, but, it's just so invigorating when a movie is what you want it to be.
Yeah, definitely. It's as pleasant of a surprise as I've ever gotten from Netflix. So I'm very happy with it. I want to go watch more Westerns right now, if I'm being honest. That, triggered something in me, that it was such a good delivery of what I love in a Western that I want to go back to the classics it reminds me of.
Get over here, Seamus. I've got Good, the Bad, and the Ugly, fresh minted on Blu-ray.
Ooh, I've got the other two, which are good but less good on Blu-ray as well, if you want me to bring those.
Alright, should we move on to our pop culture reference?
Let's do it.
For this week's pop culture reference, we're going to be talking about the historical context of The Harder They Fall. This week's main segment, The Harder They Fall, uses real historical figures in a fictional story. The film's writer and director, James Samuel, has spoken extensively about creating period films that center around women and people of color, and using real characters to further root it in reality and connect the audience with the real-life history. For example, the film's lead, Nat Love, was born into slavery in 1856 in Tennessee, and was championed for his shooting skills, cow roping, and horse branding. He published what is believed to be one of the very few full-length autobiographies of a black cowboy, The Life and Adventures of Nat Love, in 1907. And, conversely, the villain of the film, Rufus Buck, did actually lead the Rufus Buck Gang in 1895, robbing, raping, and pillaging white and black communities alike. He and his gang were executed when he was only 18 years old in 1896. You can learn more about his exploits in I Dreamt I Was in Heaven, The Rampage of the Rufus Buck Gang.
There are some other works that can better inform the real-life stories of the characters portrayed in the film, including the real-life stagecoach Mary Fields writing her autobiography called Plain Girl, plus a book called Deliverance, Mary Fields, that focuses on Fields' time as the first black female mail carrier in the U.S. Cherokee Bill, the Other Goldsby, the sequel to a book detailing the life of Cherokee Bill's father, Sergeant Goldsby, and the 20th Cavalry, is said to be the most complete story of Cherokee Bill's life ever assembled. Lastly, we found an LA Times article, What's True in The Harder They Fall, to be a really great, accessible, and fairly comprehensive resource for breaking down and learning about the different figures in the film.
Also, in 2013, James Samuel wrote and directed another homage to classic black Western cinema, They Die by Dawn, that included many of the same characters and iconography of today's main segment, including Nat Love, Bass Reeves, Stagecoach Mary, and Bill Pickett. I, for one, Seamus, am definitely going to be checking out a lot of the books that we just mentioned, because I had heard, of Bass Reeves and Nat Love before, but even just skimming the Wikipedia of Cherokee Bill and learning about his absolutely insane real life story, his time in the Civil War, fleeing the Confederacy at Gettysburg and then enlisting with the Union. Such a fascinating story, and I really want to learn more about these figures.
Yeah, you were telling me about that. That was like sending chills down my spine. Some of the details that you teased me with about Cherokee Bill, but also just that Nat Love autobiography, to have the right from the mouth of the man himself, to be able to like hear his thoughts about what happened, let alone recap some of the events that he was, famous for, what he remembered. I think that would just be a fascinating read.
It sounds to me like we're gonna have to start a little book club, Seamus.
Yeah, I would love that. Cowboy Book Club? I'm totally in.
But why don't we go ahead and move on and save the rec center?
Let's do it. Now it's time to Save the Rec Center, where we give you our weekly recommendations. Garrett, you want to go first this week?
I absolutely do, because I want to talk about something that has a weird, even though you wouldn't think it, amount of connections to today's main segment, The Harder They Fall. HBO's Watchmen miniseries, the sequel to the Alan Moore graphic novel, stars Regina King, who's in this film, as well as Danielle Deadwyler, Cuffy herself, and includes, at many points, conversations and depictions of Bass Reeves.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah, no, it's great. I really like that miniseries. I went in pretty skeptical on it. Watchmen, when I read it in high school, really changed my perspective on like graphic novels. And going and visiting this as a sequel truly to the graphic novel, it's a really interesting meditation on the contemporary relationship between African Americans and police currently going on in the United States, as well as how that's connected on a deeper level to like Western iconography and its roots, which is something that Watchmen, the graphic novel, doesn't really talk about, but it does a really good job of successfully continuing the story set up in Watchmen and bringing those modern themes into that story.
Damn, that sounds fantastic. I've heard incredible things about that miniseries, and much like you, I fell in love with the book in high school, not realizing how well done something like that could be. And am I crazy, or didn't the Watchmen show get another season, or is it like ongoing, or is it strictly like a limited series?
It's a limited series. It wasn't initially announced as such, but they decided that after the season 1 they were gonna not continue it.
Well, okay, hey, if they wrapped it up well, I'm very excited to check that out. HBO, right? I know that much.
Yeah, HBO. You can check it out on HBO Max, Seamus.
Hell yeah, I definitely will do that. I love the book. Never saw the weird movie. I know it has very little to do with that miniseries, but I'm just curious.
But what do you have this week, Seamus?
This week, I am gonna bring up the fact that while I was sick on my birthday, my only thing that I wanted to do was watch movies, so I watched 5 in a row all day, and it was fantastic. And the way I did things is I didn't plan anything ahead. I just picked whatever movie that I saw that I thought might be fun at the time. And I ended up rewatching the original Rush Hour with Jackie Chan and Chris Tucker. And if you haven't seen it / haven't seen it in a long time, it is going to blow your mind, because it is the wildest movie I've ever seen. It's the most contemporary, like, buddy cop movie I can remember loving to death, and it's just so weird. It's so bizarre. It's the most, like, racially motivated buddy cop thing that they're very casual about throwing around, as Jackie Chan's character is from Hong Kong, and Chris Tucker's obviously a black LAPD officer, and it's hilarious, and obviously Jackie Chan is an incredible athlete and stunt performer, so you get to see a lot of that, and it will just shock you the amount of things that they could get away with in 1999 or whenever that movie came out, but it's a blast to watch either way, so I highly, highly recommend that.
Fascinating. That is a movie that I've never had much interest in, but if you're giving it your sign of approval, your seal of approval, maybe I'll have to check it out.
And don't get me wrong, it's far from my favorite movie, and I have a lot of nostalgia attached to this because I saw it quite young, but if you want just a bizarre, entertaining time, it's top of the list for that.
Awesome. That I will have to look into.
Yes.
Seamus.
We'll do a little triple feature. I'd rewatch those all in a row.
Is there 3 of those movies?
Yeah, man, and they do it like Die Hard style, where the second one takes place like 3 days after the first one, and I think they do the same thing in the third one.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
actually.
it's bizarre. I'll watch it with you sometime. But I think that wraps us up for today's show. If you want to reach us here at Pop Culture Reference, you can hit us up on Twitter at PCR_podcast, on Instagram at PCR_podcast, and on TikTok at PCR_podcast. You could also shoot us an email with any comments or questions at popculturereferencepod@gmail.com. And please drop us a rate and review. I know we are like 100 episodes deep almost, and that might not be as much of a factor, but we don't have too many of those. Give us a 5-star if you like us. That would literally make our day, truly.
Next week, we're going to be covering, I can't believe we're already here, Ghostbusters Afterlife.
That is an insane sentence. Go on.
A movie that seems like it's been coming out for 2 years straight. I'm excited to talk about it. Go ahead and revisit our old Ghostbusters episode. That was like one of the first
oh my God,
things
yeah, that was
we
like,
covered on this show.
That was like the second or the third episode, maybe?
The audio quality's probably terrible. We're probably not funny at all.
We're just shaky little sophomores.
But then again, maybe you don't think we're funny now, so...
Yeah, who knows? I can't wait.
I'm looking forward to talking that with you, Seamus.
Yeah, me too. I'm going to watch Ghostbusters 2016 to prep.
I'm probably going to watch Ghostbusters 2 this week. I recently watched the first one.
I love Ghostbusters 2.
Better late than never. That's what I say.
I love it. Oh, fingers crossed this one is at least as good as Ghostbusters 2. I'll be happy with that.
Oh no, Ghostbusters 2's pretty rough.
That's what I'm saying. The bar is low, Garrett.
Alright, but we will see you next week.
Adios, amigos.